Hi, my name is Ed Minger, and I'm running for Secretary of State of Washington. I'm one of 4 candidates running, so it's nice and easy to do your research. And if you go to the Get Involved page, I've set it up so you can do some research on all of us. Fantastic. I'm also the only independent running in the race. And there's some news, and I've updated this video and a couple other things on the page. But the news is here on July 15th at 7 p.m. You can go to kvru.org and you can listen to myself, the progressive Gentry Lang, the Democrat, Gail Tarleton, and the Republican and incumbent person who already has the job of Secretary of State, Kim Wyman, and we're going to have a discussion. It's our first open forum that you'll get to hear where we actually talk about our different ideas of what your representative government can be and should be. Lovely. And the next piece of news is this, the very next day, on July 16th at 7 p.m. at ksps.org. That's the Seattle affiliate with PBS. I'm not sure if it'll be available immediately on the website, but we'll figure it out. The League of Women Voters and the Spokesman Review, which is a newspaper in that area, are hosting another forum where they're going to ask different questions, and it's going to be the same 4 folks explaining their vision and their ideas of what your government can and should be. Lovely. And the next piece of news, on July 20th, Horizon House is hosting a similar forum with the 4 of us again, and that'll be posted later on their YouTube webpage, and I'll let you know when that happens. I might even post it on this site for your convenience. And here's where we are going to stand out. I'm going to emphasize these things, and everything on this website emphasizes these 3 things. Your representative government is not as representative as it can be until it can match the people when it comes to empathy, collaboration, working together, and responsiveness. If you go to work and you let anything get in the way of your ability to try to understand where your coworkers or your customers are coming from, you didn't have a great day. Our government is not rewarded. They need to be rewarded by being empathetic, by listening, not just to the left or to the right or to their donors or to their party, but by listening to everybody. That's empathy. Feeling what they're feeling, trying to understand where they're coming from, even if they're mad, even if they're screaming at you, you'd understand they're coming from a place. Figure out what the place is and figure out how you can collaborate with your coworkers to address the problem. This is another place where our government falls short, because in your workplace, if you can't get along with others, if you don't play well with others, if you can't get stuff done with other folks, you are not collaborating. And you're having a bad day. Our government, when it comes to empathy, is having a bad day. Our government, when it comes to working together to get things done, is having a bad day. And the last one is responsiveness. Your government is yours. Your government is ours. They need to respond in a systematic way to challenges that folks face throughout Washington State. They can't pretend that the city problems are just the city problems. They can't pretend that the rural problems are just the rural problems. They can't pretend that our problems are against each other. They need to know that they need to figure out ways to respond to all of the challenges that we face in Washington State. But they're not rewarded in election season. They are not rewarded by showing extra empathy, extra collaboration, and extra responsiveness. And we need to change that. We need to fix that. And that's why I'm running to become Secretary of State of Washington. And that's why, if you tune in on July 20th, or July 16th, or July 15th, you're going to hear some specifics of how we get there. And I'm going to do a quick rundown of specifics. And this is the part where I speed up, because if you really want the slower version, it's over on the side of the screen with the buttons. The first one, approval voting. This comes from here. Empathy and collaboration. You should be able to not just choose between one of 2 people, the Democrat or the Republican, in a general election, or the 2 Democrats or the 2 Republicans. You should be able to choose and be trusted to research between 3 and 5 people. There's 5, there we go. And you should be able to check the box next to anybody that you approve of. What that means is it's going to reward people that can listen not just to you and what you want, but also listen to your neighbors who you might disagree with. And also speak to you and say, hey, do you know your neighbor's dealing with this? And also speak to your neighbor and say, hey, did you know that so-and-so is dealing with this? And help you guys understand each other better. and say, here's what we have to do for the law. Here's what we have to do to make sure that everybody's as pleased as possible. We're going to empathize with each other. We're going to collaborate together, and we are going to respond to each other's challenges. And with approval voting, if you're checking the box next to the people that are approved of by large numbers of folks, that means they can listen to the slight left and the slight right. It means they can listen. Maybe sometimes the far right has a good idea. Maybe sometimes the far left has a good idea. And if people are able to seem like and run on the fact that they're willing and able to listen to our broad and diverse political spectrum, they're going to be rewarded with more approval when you go and vote. Approval voting. Fantastic. The next thing you'll see is money in politics. Ooh, money in politics. If you want to lose an election, pick a fight with everybody who donates to politics. Everybody. Just say, your money's no good here. I dare you. You're not going to win. I'm not going to do that, though. I'm not going to do that because it's not on them. It's not on donors who've been convinced that you have to give a candidate $4,000 to buy 4,000 yard signs so they can advertise to a bunch of people so that when you call them, you can say, hey, I gave you $4,000. Do you want to hear me out about law X, Y, or Z? They've been convinced that that's what they have to do to be able to make the phone call and be heard. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. It's not the party's fault that they feel like they have to run the most advertising and raise the most money for their candidates to run the most advertising so they can seem legitimate in the eyes of the voters. It's not the party's fault. So it's not the special interest fault, not the party's fault, and it's not the politicians' fault that say, I guess that's just the way the game is played. I pick a party, I please the party gives me the up-to-date call list because they prefer me, even though a lot of people might prefer the Democrats or a lot of people might prefer the Republicans. If the Democrats prefer you, you get the up-to-date call list. If the Republicans prefer you, you get the up-to-date call list. And at some point, those parties are going to give you $15,000 to buy 15,000 yard signs so that you can reach that many more voters so that you can get a job doing your very best to represent as many people as possible, except for the fact that if the Republicans or the Democrats say that the Republicans or the Democrats have to do a certain thing because the donors said that they have to do a certain thing, all of a sudden those politicians say, I guess I have to do a certain thing. Empathy goes out the window. Collaboration goes out the window. Responsiveness goes out the window because of those imperfections that all of us feel like we have to participate in, but we don't. But how do we get money out of politics without picking a fight with literally everybody who benefits with money in politics? First of all, you have one person willing to run for the job of running elections who refuses to purchase advertising. Hi, I'm Ed Minger, and I refuse to purchase advertising. Then we demonstrate that you can actually win that way. And then we make a simple rule. Campaigns, and campaigns only for now, cannot purchase their own advertising. Wait a minute. What am I going to spend my money on? Do I not need to raise the money anymore? Interesting. But that's not really how it's going to go. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, if you've been here before, there's a new button down at the bottom, and it says Cooperative Campaign. And there's a good explanation, but if you prefer the video explanation, I'll go super quick. Instead of the NRA funding an event for the Republican candidates where they're all just going to agree with each other, and the Democrats and the Organization for Gun Responsibility, I think that's what one of them's called, the anti-NRA, they're going to fund one with all the Democrats, and they're going to get together and they're going to agree with each other, and they're going to have fundraisers and make a bunch of money so they can pay for advertising, so they can seem legitimate, so you vote for them. Instead of that, cooperative campaigning, rules like that, would say, since my campaign can't purchase advertising next year and the other campaigns can't purchase advertising for any one of us next year, it doesn't mean that the NRA and the anti-NRA can't come together and make an event, a fundraiser. Let's bring in some school counselors. Let's bring in some resource officers from our schools. Let's bring in some folks that understand school safety, and let's bring in some folks that understand gang violence and communities that are struggling with that. Let's bring in more people to a group fundraiser where every person is heard, all of the potential elected representatives that are running, quote unquote, against each other, they get to hear all of the groups, all sides of the issue. They get to speak, say, hi, I want to be your elected representative. I'm so glad that we're all here together and hearing each other out. This is a wonderful thing. That would be a cooperative fundraiser. And then those 3 to 5 candidates in the general election could come together and they could get a piece of paper, say, hey, there's 5 of us. Let's mail one of these to everybody in the state, and you get a fifth of it, and you get a fifth of it, and you get a fifth of it, and we all get a fifth of it, and we get to choose. Like, you get 200 words and a picture of yourself, and we're going to mail that to voters. It's equal access. You will have equal access to be educated. The people that funded the event, that made it so that those campaigns could afford the graphic designer, could afford to print this, could afford to mail this to every voter in Washington, everybody benefits from cooperative campaigning. It's slightly outside the box, but the print shop and the mailers and the people that do the work, the people that do the robocalls that are suddenly robocalling for 5 people instead of just 1 person, all those people stay employed in the transition. Fundraising still exists in the transition. If you want to set up an event where your special interest can be heard, go find an opposing special interest and make it a co-sponsored event. Why? Because if we can't talk to each other, we can't empathize with each other. And if we go to our corners continually, forever, like we have for over 200 years now, if we're set up to separate, to go to our corner and talk to our people and raise money with just our people, then when we come together to try to mediate and try to govern for all people, we can't do it. We can't empathize. We sure as heck can't collaborate in that environment, and it gets in the way of government responsiveness, and it's every single issue that divides us. So I'm just not going to purchase advertising. Long story short, I'm not going to purchase advertising. If we can win that way and show that it's possible, we just make a rule. Campaigns can't buy individual advertising. You got to figure out a different way. I've laid out different ways in text form right below me on this page where it says cooperative campaigning. It also says SOS one-pager. And that is about 1.5 pages now, and it's got a bunch of links about all the things I want to do. But this website specifically focuses on election reform. It specifically focuses on these things. And the last thing, responsiveness, empathy, collaboration. The Washington State 10 would be an elected research group that takes 1 to 3 complicated issues. So just spend 3 or 4 months on gun legislation. Do it publicly. Bring in all the stakeholders into the room and talk to them and hear them and make them talk to each other and make them hear each other and mediate for them and make a deal. Make some sort of legislation that's comprehensive, that still might be controversial and imperfect. It will be controversial and imperfect, but the fact that people feel heard, the fact that people were empathized with, that they collaborated to get the result, that's responsiveness. You're responding to what people are bringing to the table, and you're collaborating around a bunch of ideas. So the Washington State 10 is about 20 people, 2 people from each district is the way I'm currently thinking about it, who get elected from congressional districts throughout the state. And all they do is they take a few months to research publicly with public comment something that would normally divide us and tear us apart. Let's do those things better. First and foremost, take the most divisive things we can and give it to a group that doesn't even pass laws. The elected research group, the Washington State 10, all they do is research. And they revise and they edit and they do so publicly. And then they say, here you go, legislative branch. Here's a good start. People were heard when we made this. And it doesn't have to be gun legislation. It could be transportation, where Eastern and Western Washington are often pitted against each other unnecessarily. It could be education reform, where folks who are for more flexibility in their educational choices are often seen to be threatening people that benefit from the public education system. Let's break those things down. Let's work together to do education reform. Let's look at our environment. 20, 30 years ago, Democrats and Republicans were not divided on the importance of protecting our environment. Now, for some reason, they are. They shouldn't be, because it's not the Democrats' environment versus the Republicans' environment. It's all of our environment. But it's also the businesses' environment. It's also campers' and hunters' environment. It's everybody's environment. It's Native Americans' environment. It is all of ours. But we pit ourselves against each other. And the Washington State 10 can say, let's look environment, let's look at its effect on industry, let's look at all of the ramifications of any changes we try to do, and let's do something to protect our shared environment. Empathy. Feeling what each other feels. Collaboration. Working with people you disagree with to solve hard problems. Responsiveness. You are in charge of your government. There is no exception to this. You are the ultimate authority over your system. It's in Article 4 of the Constitution. You are guaranteed something called a Republican form of government. It's not a party. It means that you are the ultimate authority, and that authority starts with the decision-making process. It starts with election reform. It starts with making sure that you are never limited in your options with approval voting. It starts with making sure that there is no foreign or domestic meddling in your elections in the form of donations. It starts with making sure that you're able to call your elected representatives, whether they're Democrat, Republican, or other, and they will listen to you based on who you are, where you're from, who you represent, and what you know. And if they can't do that, we don't have a system based on this. So, let's make one together. Okay, cool. I think that's it. This went longer than I wanted, but I just kept coming back to that. Let's come back to this. If you feel like we've never been here, let's get here. Let's continue to create a more perfect union in Washington State. Thanks. Have a good day.